Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're running slightly late, so that takes the pressure off me to try and keep 20 minutes. So whenever I finish, we'll just roll with it. So unfortunately today I don't have any robots, but some of the team will be coming later to show some of them. So for those of you that haven't seen MekaMon before and you hang around later, you'll be able to play with them and get a hands-on experience. So, I'm supposed to be talking about being groundbreaking. When that topic was shared, I wasn't really sure how to tackle it. So I figured the best way was to keep this conversational, to share real elements of the story in a similar way to Seth. It's there are lots of struggles in there, and not always the glitzy, glamorous stuff that you see or read in the press. So I'm going to try and take you through the story of Reach Robotics, and through that, show you some of the groundbreaking stuff that we do, some of the challenges or unlikely elements of the story, and how we navigated that, and where we are today and when we're going. There's been a bit of an intro on me. So my name is Silas Adekunle, co-founder and CEO of Reach Robotics. The team at the moment is currently 56 people. We are headquartered here in Bristol. The company was started 5 years ago, was incorporated 5 years ago. I was still a student at the time, so I was in my second to last year at university. So about 2 years of that was actually spent figuring out what the hell I was doing, what a business was, how to get stuff off the ground. So really things started accelerating about 3 years ago. That's when we really started to take off. So we can pause there and I'll roll back a bit with my background. So I was born in Nigeria, towards the west of Nigeria, so I'm Yoruba. Moved to the UK when I was about 12 years old. And my childhood was really beautiful. I had a lot of exposure to wildlife. I love biology. So that was a big part of my upbringing. I'm the type of kid that would be going up, picking up spiders, looking at animals, stuff like that. And also, I loved tinkering with things. So I'd be taking apart my sister's dolls, never actually putting them back together, taking apart radios. They still love me at school. Taking apart radios and just learning. So I was really curious, really inquisitive. My father was a biochemistry teacher. My mother was a medical nurse. So I grew up around a relatively scientific, or a home that had scientific interest. So all of those things always had me being curious, asking questions, asking why. I'd sit in the back of my dad's lecture rooms sometimes, just, I don't know, probably when I was about 7, listening to university level topics. So always really curious. So when I moved to the UK, there was an opportunity for me to get involved in Lego NXT classes. So that was where I started to understand what robotics was. So that interest never really stopped. So I spent some time in after-school clubs, building robots with these Lego kits, competing with other students, our schools, competing. We were promised that we'd go to America, and I remember being really excited, but the teacher lied. That never really happened. It was just a little apple to dangle on the string to get us excited. I've traveled now to America too many times to count. I just landed back yesterday after a 1-day trip to San Francisco. So if I look a bit mellow, it's just like super jet lag, like lack of energy. So off the back of learning about robotics and can you guys hear me, by the way, because I know the sound is slightly, so my voice is strong enough to carry to the back of the room. So off the back of that, from tinkering with toys and playing with these different Lego robots and then building my own robots and starting to put them together, I started to realize that my interest was in robotics. And I remember clearly a moment where I said to myself, well, I'm going to make a living through robotics in one way or another. So when I went to university, actually, it's a funny story. So when I graduated, I studied physics, maths, ICT, all the usual suspects. And then, I wanted to do robotics. So at that time, robotics was an option. Animatronics was an option. Cybernetics wasn't really a thing. Just looking at some of the topics I searched for. And I went on YouTube. I think YouTube was around that time. It was a thing. I'm not that old. I'm 27, I guess, but I'm losing track of time now, just because so much has happened in such a condensed space of time. So I went on YouTube and I searched for UK robots. And a video came up from the Bristol Robotics Lab. And like, trust me, that is the reason why I'm in Bristol today. So I just saw this video. I saw that, they had robots. They look like they know what they're doing. They look like they know how to build robots, and I applied. And, I got accepted. And then when I arrived in Bristol, it turned out to be the best robotics lab in Europe, So that was really interesting. And I think without the environment of the robotics lab being there, Reach Robotics wouldn't be where it is today, and my story wouldn't be where it is today. So, and then like everyone else, I have now fallen in love with Bristol, obviously, from when you get here and you realize kind of the eclectic mix of things that you can do, the different types of creative skills and different industries that are here, and the music scene. There's just enough in Bristol, and I'm not a London type of person, so Bristol is just the right size of a city for me. So, again, back to, I'm going to make a living through robotics. So I arrived at university, learned to code the first year. So before that, I didn't know how to code. The second year, started thinking through, okay, what are you going to do with robotics? So by the third year, when I'd gone to do my work placement with General Electric and Infineon. So I get bored quite fast. That's the problem. So I've had a job that I've been fired from. This is a job that was on an assembly line where I had to basically dip, like wire, put in solder, and then pass it on like an assembly line job. And I questioned, like, what is my purpose in life? Is this my purpose to take wires, dip it in, and pass it along? And I sucked at it. Like, the guy rang me after. I think because I was so bored, there was no motivation. And most people would take that as a, for some people, they would just take that as a knock, as a blow. For me, it was a lesson, which was, if you're not passionate about it, it's not worth doing. You're going to suck at it. You're not going to excel at it. So I took a lesson out of that, or you could just say I'm just copping out of it, whichever way you want to look at it. So I took a lesson out of that, which was, okay, if I really sucked at that job, then I need to find something interesting. I thought I'd learned my lesson, so I went off to, during placement, I applied for 2 companies. So I applied to the usual suspects, Intel, got turned down. I applied to General Electric, GE Aviation, and then I applied to another one in Bristol called Infineon Technology. So I got an offer from GE. I turned them down because I thought I was better, and it was also a different industry. And then I went to Infineon to work on chips. But unfortunately, that job was pure coding, and I need to see something move to be excited about it. So after about 6 months, I got bored at that job, and then I went knocking back on GE's door, which was, will you guys take me back? But at the time, they'd seen this interesting prototype leg that I'd built, and they just thought that was amazing. So halfway through the placement year, they never take anybody back, but in that, just because I was brave enough to ring up the lady that was the HR manager, she saw something and she said, yeah, you can come back. So I had 6 months where I was working at GE, but I had some time to kill. I basically could go in and define my own project. So, but instead of spending 6 months there, I spent 3 months actually, and then I decided to cut it off. And the reason for that was that the idea behind MekaMon was starting to develop. And MekaMon, short for Mechanical Monster, is a robot that you control from your smartphone or tablet. Think of it as a video game character in real life. If you could have Pokemon in real life, for example. Now I wish there was a robot here because it's much easier to show rather than to tell you guys, but you're going to have to work with me here. So the robots have 4 legs, the legs can come off, you can change them around. What's unique about them is the way that they look like they're alive. The most times people see them, and especially when you guys see them later if you stick around, they even wave at you and things like that. People say things like, well, I get an emotional reaction. And that was really important. That was deliberate for us to put it in there. The reason for that being, so, hopefully you guys are following the timeline of the story. When I made the decision, which was I'm going to have robotics as the next part of my life. In my second year, I started this program where I was taking robots into schools, trying to get young people more interested in science and engineering and things like that. And I pitched this program to UWE, I pitched it to Hewlett-Packard, pitched it to the Prince's Trust. You could say it was my first business, so to say, because they gave me some funding, I bought some kits, recruited some university students, and we went into schools and were engaging these students. But there was a real shift when I saw that if you add gaming concepts to these classes, the students were highly engaged. They were, these students from disadvantaged backgrounds, normally rowdy. They were working together. They were collaborating, and I felt, this is the reason why I went into robotics, to create those things that you normally see in science fiction and to make them a reality. So, from all of that and all of that realization was the idea that you could make a video game character in real life. I used to be a gamer. I don't really get much. I've got games on my laptop. I haven't touched like any of them in, I don't know, since when. So, but the only game I play now is stuff to do with MekaMon. So that was where the idea for MekaMon originated. Now, if you're looking at the timeline, that was, I think I went to uni. So the company was incorporated in 2013, in my third year, then I would have started uni at 2010. So 2012 was when the school stuff started, the idea started. It took me to 2013 to kind of flatten, it takes time for an idea to develop, but when you find yourself not being able to shake it off, then you know that you've got something interesting and you have to satisfy that curiosity and try it. So I decided to quit my placement slightly early, built this really ugly first. So in our office, we've got a wall full of about 18, 20 prototypes, the different stages we've gone through with MekaMon from the very first one. We lovingly call it Franken-Mecha because it looks like, a dog has chewed it up and there's bits of wire sticking out. But this was my baby for a while. I was taking this around, pitching it to people. They couldn't see the vision, but, I could see what it would eventually become one day. So created this very first prototype and then started to go through networking events. So keeping in mind my background is pure robotics at this time, and I was still actually studying, so I wouldn't consider myself a robotics expert now, even though I know a bit more in terms of the commercial angle as well. But back then, still learning a lot, and I hadn't even completed my final year project. So there was a lot to learn, and I took the time alongside with my studies to start to develop those skills myself. A lot of people ask me today, well, how did you pick up that skill? And knowledge is so free today. You can go online, learn anything about investors, learn about, net profit, gross profit, margins, profit margins, all of these things. You can pick all of those up over time if you take the time. So I pick up these skills over time. So to get to then the story of the startup. So at this point, I started going to networking events, meeting people. The first thing I realized was, okay, you're going to need to put a team together. Actually, before that was, so I'm a student, I don't really have money. I've just been fired from this job that I sucked at. I'm going to need to find investment for this. So I went through Set Squared here in Bristol, and I'll touch on a few of the Bristol ecosystem that also supported us as well, just to show you how it all comes together. Hopefully we've got enough time. Let me know if I need to accelerate. So I started pitching and talking to different people, went to Set Squared. They helped with some advice a bit. I leveraged the ecosystem that I was in quite strongly, so that was the university at the time. So okay, I want to build something, I need to find somebody to talk to. There was someone in charge of entrepreneurship at the time. Like, okay, you've got ideas. People never know how seriously to take you until you become persistent enough that they just want to help you so that you can get out of their face. So it took a while, just persistence, and then, okay, we can probably give you a grant of £200 or £300 to go get some prototypes made. Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, next week, well, I've created a prototype, what else can you do to help me? So persistence. So, but what was happening was I knew, starting from A to you're trying to get to Z, you need to be able to see where you're trying to get to and break that down into steps. You might not know what's far ahead, but at least you can see what the next step is. So for me at the time was to try and help people visualize what this vision was, which was, for a robot that is an ecosystem that you control from your smartphone or tablet. Let's create a prototype that can at least respond to an app prototype. So I went to networking events, found a guy called Tim. So he was a game developer at the time. I'm like, hey man, if you help me out, I will give you some equity at some point in the future. For some reason, it believed me. Some people say it's the charm or the smile or something. I don't know if that's true, but this guy was happy to work for a few months and just help to create the prototype. So I had that as a package. That's great. Now I've got a robot and an app. that work separately, but at least I can now help people to see that vision a bit more. If I'm just telling you about, at least I've got a photo now. I could still be a fraud, right? Because there's no real robot here. But if I was telling you I've got this idea, it's better to just have something to actually show you. So that has always been my goal, and that's the reason why I would rather fly to America to take a 1 hour meeting, which we actually did. I will get to it, than try and have a phone call with you, because I won't be able to get it across to you over a phone call. So for the first year in 2013 of the company, 2013 to 2014, was looking at where to get grants from, looking at where to pull a team together from. So I met my two of my co-founders through that. So I met John, so it was actually an investor. And at the time, so I'd learned this lesson that when you're looking at different stages of funding for a startup, you're looking at the very first stage. If you don't have any money yourself, is you look at friends, family, or they say, I think unfairly, fools, because most of the time you end up losing their money. And I didn't really have any of those. I've got friends and family, but I don't have friends and family that have money. So I've got my parents here. I didn't really have any friends that had money. So John from Set Square, they introduced me to someone who eventually then became integral to the business. And John was like, okay, you sound crazy enough. The idea that you're working on seems interesting. I'm gonna support you in one way or another. And there's an important lesson here, which is a lot of people, when they're starting their business, try to focus on get funding, get money. The money is just a means to an end, because it allows you to then hire people or to get resources. So I was able to leap without any transaction of any transaction. Okay, why don't you just work in the evenings after work? And it was an engineer, helped me build some prototypes instead. And that was the foundation for where we're then able to get to the next stage, which was, okay, how do we get something that actually works now? How do we get a robot that actually moves now? So John came on board, handling supply chain and logistics. That was his background. Through the lab, I met another guy, so Chris, who was our CTO, so we were both in the robotics lab at the time. Again, leveraging the network that was around me. We're based there in Bristol. You could find people from all over the world. If you wanted a CTO, you could go try and look in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. The best person for you to support you is the people that are available right now. In this room, if you had an idea, I'm sure there are enough interesting, creative people to support that idea. So basically, try to put a team together as much as possible, and that team evolved over time. At least in the early days, I think we've gone through a transition of about 2 or 3 different people trying to find a perfect fit. Where we are today are the people that stuck around, mainly John and Chris, my 2 co-founders. So let's fast forward a little bit. So the early team was put together. We raised a lot of grants, a lot of cash to support those prototyping days. A big break came along, so we went from an initial £200 grant to then connected with Pervasive Media Studio. So sometimes it's all about luck as well, because we were taking all these small grants. And someone said something to me, which was, you make your own luck. So I think luck is this event that you can't control, but also without putting yourself in that position of doing all the work to get there, it would never happen. So we'd been building these prototypes with small bits of grants, and then it turned out there was a grant through, I think it's linked to Creative England as well. Sorry, I should know this. So there's this grant that allowed you to do research on the way children play. So it was something like a £50,000 grant, that's a huge amount of money, by the way. Given the time where we're in, the most amount of money I touched at the time for the company was, something like £3,000. So this was going to be something that would take us leaps further. We're going to definitely use this £50,000 to build the product and then start selling it. That never really happened, because to launch a consumer robotics company, it takes a lot of money. So to date, we've raised about $10 million. So it takes a lot, and that's public info. So it takes a lot of money to do that. So, but because we built all the other prototypes, we were now in a position where everything had cascaded to allow us to take advantage of this grant opportunity. So we did that. We built the prototypes, and now what? you've spent all the money, you've got a prototype in your hand, what do you do next? So, keep in mind that we are a consumer hardware company. So Bristol does have an ecosystem of hardware companies, but they're mostly B2B. So consumer hardware company. We've got entertainment as well, which is notoriously a hit-based type of business. So a lot of people shy away from it. So we're combining these two things together, and they're quite polarizing. So if you have someone that's dealing with software, in general, they don't want to deal with hardware. And you have someone that's dealing with hardware, they don't want to deal with software. So when you go to pitch to an investor, they'll say, well, I'm really a games investor, find me a really good hardware investor and I'll invest. Or, well, I'm really a robot investor, find me a strong gaming investor and I'll invest. So we've got this, what's it called when, this cyclical event, this, when you've got something that doesn't make sense because they all rely on each other. I can't remember the particular word for that. Somebody? Something like that, yeah, a catch-22, I suppose. That's more a legal term, but you get the point. So there was a challenge there, and I then had to look at what's the next option for us, which was to join a business accelerator. So now we applied to a few of them. So I'm telling you layers and layers of no's here and layers of disappointment. So the angel investor said no. Then we go to accelerators and they also said no. In the UK at least. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to apply to the US. We applied to Y Combinator, we applied to Techstars, and they both were interested. Y Combinator invited us for an interview. So let's say we applied in January. Y Combinator's interview was going to be in July. Techstars also invited us for an interview. That was in March. We were going to run out of money in May. So went to the Techstars one. So this was where, we had the prototype and I had an hypothesis, which was, okay, the only way to guarantee my chance of getting into this is to allow them to see this prototype in real life. And that will also show conviction that I'm crazy enough to take a 12-hour flight for a 1-hour meeting. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Chris and I get on a plane. We go over there. That hypothesis was right because they loved that the prototype was functioning. And they also thought we were super crazy because everyone else that was international actually just opted to do their stuff on Skype. What they didn't realize was we literally spent the last amount of money on the flight. And this was like all eggs in one basket. If it didn't work out, that's the end of the company. And you just sometimes there's just no option to fail. This just had to work. If it doesn't work, I'm going to their house and making sure that I strangle them till they accept us into accelerator. But they followed up and they said, you know what, we love what you guys are doing, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, when do we get the money? Because we need to start paying salaries next week. So we managed to get into the accelerator, and this was the time to expand the team. So I started looking for people to join. We brought on board one. So at this point, there were 4 people in the company. The next person. So after this, I'm then going to take you through just the milestones and the rapid growth. So the next person that joined on board was Jonathan. So at this point, we actually had no one to handle the software, the app side of the business. So the very first demo, I learned to code for. I wouldn't call it coding because that would be a disservice to app developers. Robotics is my thing, but I learned to make a demo app that would work. So you've got to be multi-talented. If you just have to find a way to get your story out to people. If you can't find anybody to do it, you have to do it yourself. That's always been my approach to things. So I will learn the skills, including when we didn't have a marketing team. I did my worst job at doing marketing for the company, doing sales for the company, which wasn't too bad when I get to the Apple story. But so managed to, and you also have to be able to sell the vision to people as well. So convince this guy over in who'd done a PhD, 4 years postdoc, had a really comfortable job, to leave all of that behind and come and join a band of 4 crazy people, with the promise that his first day of a job is going to be in San Diego. That probably sold it to him because San Diego is super sunny and it's got beaches, but he actually never got to see any of that because it was 5 months inside the room, all heads down trying to get this prototype out. So we went to America. We now, coming out of that 5-month program, had a network, had a prototype that was more functional, that people were starting to see where this could go. You had a demo day where you pitch to people. And you're thinking, well, this guy's in America, right? Funding is going to be super easy, like you said, Seth. Like, contrary to popular belief, we get there, and what they don't tell you is like, well, America's got a lot of money, but they mostly invest in people that are based there. So we had to make a decision. And two of the people in the team had very young kids here in Bristol. We didn't want to uproot their lives. It was just at the end of the day. So for us at Reach Robotics, for me, culturally, which then translates to the company culture, obviously, for me, people are important. You take care of people first, and then that would then allow the business to grow. If you put the other before people, it will always keep falling apart. So you need to really have a solid foundation, because the businesses are built on the back of people. So we made the decision, it's got to be people first. We're not going to uproot people's lives. We are going to headquarter and be based in Bristol. And it's not a bad place, right? You're all here. So we decided to have that decision. So every meeting, I was just, we're not moving. But because they just they saw the conviction, they saw the value in what we were building. Every time there was a meeting, they would pick up the phone and ring somebody in the UK, which is like, if you have to meet these guys. Like, we can't invest in them, but you have to, because they're local. So there's an interesting story there, or challenge. I think the UK ecosystem is changing, but we struggled to raise investment before. I mean, we're still the same people, right? So we struggled to raise investment before going to the US. But because of the social validation from the US, it then made it easier to raise funds in the UK. So by the time we came back to the UK, there was a lineup of investors trying to, invest and things like that. So we raised our first seed round. That was $1.5 million. That was in 2015. So at this point, we'd learned to make, there was a robot prototype, yeah? It was still super bad. I wish I'd lined up the videos from the early days. That will show up somewhere at some point. These prototypes were terrible, but we were close. They were better than what we had before. The next step for us was then to learn to manufacture. So the unlikeliness of this, by the way, was to, first of all, the unlikely story of the business. So we're working across different industries that normally are challenging to put together. So you have polarized investors. So there's a lot of navigation that needs to happen there. Second, I'm super inexperienced. I had to pick up a lot of skills, and the band of people I put around me at the time as well were inexperienced. So I think that naivety sometimes is a strength, because you don't know how hard shit can be. It's just like, you're just going through it like, well, there's a wall there, I'm just going to run through it. You don't know, like, you're going to get a concussion or something. You're just like, yeah, I'm going to force my way through this. And that naivety had allowed us to just get through even the toughest of phases. So whilst it was an unlikely property, it actually helped us, because we just didn't know how bad things were going to be. When you jump, it's like jumping over, you've got a safety line on, and then jumping over a large hole where you could have fallen through, and then you realize that the safety cord was actually not connected. It's kind of like that, It's you just look back and you're like, the company could have died. Oh shit! But we've gone past it. So, and we've had so many moments like that. So, raised our seed. It was now time to learn to manufacture, and you can't really do that in the UK. It's too expensive. It's also not because it's too expensive. The expertise just isn't there. A lot of people think, I'm not sure if people saw Tim Cook's talk recently. A lot of people think people go to China just for manufacturing because it's super cheap, or the labor cost is cheaper. That's one of the reasons. But because over the years they've managed to become the world leading experts at plastics and manufacturing and those types of processes. So you probably wouldn't find a tool designer here in Bristol, like a metal tool designer, whereas and these things are tolerances of like micro measurements, whereas you go to China, Shenzhen, you find so many of them. So you've got this ecosystem. So we had to learn to go. We had to go there, do all of that, to learn to manufacture, and then we also had to then learn to launch the product. So we learned to manufacture it, we learned to ship it, we learned to build the scaling of the logistics and everything like that. So from manufacturing a few hundreds to manufacturing thousands. So we launched our beta in 2016 on the back of successfully launching that. So the story seems to be like getting rosier and rosier. I tell you, it's just so much happens in such a space. it's almost like your subconscious wants you to forget it because it's traumatic. So I'm trying to accelerate the story. So off the back of being able to manufacture and set up manufacturing in China, it showed that we then achieved the next stage of the business. So the business is a bit more de-risked. So we're then able to raise so you lose count of money, it's so big. We were then able to raise a 7.5 million Series A round, which then allowed us to start to look at expanding our distribution and things like that. So as of late November and of today, actually, so 2 days ago we launched our V2, but that story actually started last November. So late November we launched in retail with Apple, which is unheard of for a company that, this is their first time taking a product to market. Actually, the guys at Beast of Balance were able to do that as well. So we worked together in kind of discussing with Apple and things like that. So the reason being that we were so focused on the product, we were so focused on building a great business, building a great product, that when they interacted with it the first time, they were really shocked. And I don't think they actually realized that the team at the time was 10 people, because if they did, then they would think, well, they're missing all of the other core functionalities of a consumer business, which is, customer service, sales and marketing, all those types of things. It was mostly engineers at the time, but I was having all these hats on and showing that I could speak the lingo when it came to that because of all the time I'd invested in learning. So, they decided to take our products. We launched with them in the UK and the US as a starting point, again, to test the market. We didn't drown ourselves too much. A lot of people will try to come out of the gate. There are some crazy stuff that I can't share just yet because they're too recent, but one day I hope to be able to share them. Things that if you don't test the waters, so there is an importance in testing. Again, when people hear startup stories, they think it's just, this unstoppable force just moving through. You still do have to exercise. It's a balance of it's a balance of being careful and it's controlled recklessness. I'm not sure how to put it. It's controlled recklessness. You have to be brave and also be tentative at the same time. So you can't go out there and try to take over the market. Whereas you still have to be careful with how you scale that. So there was a lot of patience, and keeping in mind this is a story that's been going on for 5 years. I was tired. I wanted to get out there and get this product out there. But what happens if you try to manufacture 100,000 units in one go is if something goes wrong there, you lose a lot of money. If something goes wrong there, you lose brand reputation. So we couldn't really do that. We had to be patient again and just hold ourselves back until we tested the market and were able to then do the next phase. So I think my time is running out. If I were to summarize a few of the lessons there, when it comes to being groundbreaking, it takes thought, it takes patience, it takes fighting against the odds. I think the only way you can really do that is when you are passionate about what you're doing. If you are always making sure that everything that you're working on, going back to my first experience in life when I got fired from my soda dipping assembly line job, if you are passionate about what you're doing, and a lot of people throw the word passion around, but if you truly enjoy what you're doing and it brings a smile to your face and you can't think of doing anything else, then you will give yourself the opportunity to do the best work of your life, and you will, because you do that, be able to fight against the odds and overcome challenges. So that's a little about us, Reach Robotics, how we're groundbreaking. Obviously, because we're a robotics company, the next plan for us is to take over the world, as expected, and that's what we're going to do. But it'll be great to say that we did that from little Bristol over here, because we've decided we're keeping our headquarters here. We're going to expand to different countries, but our home is going to be here. So thank you for the opportunity to share that story with you.